Want to go far in business and in life? You can't do it alone. The secret is expanding your network of personal relationships, building friendships, connecting on an intimate level, away from the office, over a coffee or cocktail. Welcome to All In with the real Nate Payo. The show that asks what happens when you go all in and leverage the power of your network of personal relationships.
From author Donnie Bovine comes the book, How to Be a Success Champion, available on Amazon. After years of living other people's dreams, author Donnie Bovine decided to jump out on his own and start a business, thinking it would be easy. Instead, he had a rude awakening and quickly understood that he had spent 20 years being an employee and had no idea how to be a business owner. His business was tanking, and he was on the brink of losing everything when he decided to fight for business freedom. In this must-read and life-changing book, author Donnie Bovine shares with readers his story intermingled with lessons learned from his mistakes and his failures. In How to Be a Success Champion, you will find advice the author received from mentors and how he went from zero to a six-figure business. The author walks you through the steps of how to get out of your own way, how to play the game of business and win, find your strengths, how to network effectively, how to build a personal brand, how to create champions for your business, how to get great at sales, how to take complete ownership of you and your business. How to Be a Success Champion from author Donnie Bovine, available on Amazon in both Kindle and paperback editions. Order your copy right now. It makes a great book for corporate events too. How to Be a Success Champion from author Donnie Bovine, available on Amazon.
Hello. Welcome to the All In podcast with Nate Payo. Of course, I am your host, Nate Payo. My guest today is Ryan Condie. Ryan Condie has started 8 businesses, bought 2, and had 2 successful exits. He's in the middle of his search for his next acquisition. He's an entrepreneurship. He does entrepreneurship through acquisition, and it's an incredible way to build financial freedom and own your own company. It's also a lot less risky than starting from scratch. Welcome to the show, Ryan. How are you?
Great, Nate. Thanks for having me on the show. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, I'm excited. So we were kind of chit-chatting a little bit about, buying and selling businesses and talking to startups and looking for deals and talking about how being out there in the public eye kind of leads to a little bit more deal flow coming your way. What kind of got you started in being an entrepreneur, and why did you want to go down this route?
Yeah. So I think most entrepreneurs can see some of these seeds being sown throughout their life, whether they're selling lemonade on the corner as a kid and kind of those types of things. And I'd always I've never been I was always a good employee in the sense that I always added a lot of value, but I never really enjoyed it until when I was always doing my own thing. And so whenever I was doing my own thing, whether it was a side project, whether it was a full-time thing, I just loved it. I soaked it in. So I graduated from college in 2010, and I remember thinking for 4 years of college, I didn't really learn anything except there was one class that was taught by a couple local VC guys, so venture capitalists. And they basically taught you how to buy companies. And, went through the business program. I basically didn't learn anything. Everything I've learned has been kind of on just trial and error doing things. And so after a couple of years in 2012, there was a company I was using. They sold old polyester wallets. So they would take old polyester ties and turn them into wallets. And I went on their website to go buy a new wallet, and I realized they didn't have very many in stock. And so I thought to myself, I wonder what's going on with this company. And I immediately thought back to that class I had taken in college, and I thought, well, what if I could buy these guys? So instead of buying a wallet, I kind of tracked down the owner's phone number, Nate, and I called him up. And of course, asked him if he was wanting to sell, with no tact or anything like that, right? Just, hey, you want to sell your business? And he said no, of course. And we kind of hit it off and became friends. And I just kept calling him every 2 weeks. For about 3 months, and just kind of had ideas and share ideas with him. And then out of the blue, 3 months kind of in this process, we became buddies, and he called me out of the blue and said, hey, I need to move on from this business. I'm tired of it. I've been running it for 5 years. you seem like you've got a lot of energy. Like, let's make a deal. And so that was kind of my first foray into like, oh, I can actually buy a website or buy a company. And I've started a lot of companies in the past, some full-time, some not. As you can see right now, I'm standing in my candy factory that we built from scratch 6 years ago. And what I realized by buying the company is I didn't need to learn how to make wallets. I didn't need to learn how to manufacture anything. I didn't need to learn how to build a website. I didn't need to learn how to drive traffic. All that stuff was already in place. And what I was able to do is basically take my ability to create content, my ability to improve the SEO and the rankings for this and the partnerships for that particular brand. And I was able to grow that business. And so that was kind of my first foray into like buying versus building. And to be honest with you, I've bought several companies and they're a lot more fun to run than going through the grind of eating ramen noodles for 3 or 4 years as you try to get those first customers and those first products. And so I've just kind of jumped into the entrepreneurship through acquisition part because I think as we were talking just a minute before this, Nate, it's like, if a lot of people don't have a lot of time or they don't have any ideas and they're not wanting to eat those ramen noodles for 5 to 10 years as they start a company. And, whatever the stats are, we hear that like 90 or 95% of startups fail. Whereas typically through acquisitions, you have about a 95 to 98% success rate. If a company was in business 5 years ago and it was making money last year, there's a pretty good chance it's going to make money next year and also in 5 years. And so that was kind of my first foray into buying a website and just kind of stumbling into that business.
I love what you're talking about because I like relate to a lot of what you're saying. Like I've had jobs almost all my career. I've had a few businesses that I did as my full-time source of income. I've had part-time businesses, and I've had those businesses that last, a couple minutes. That this idea you have in the shower. There's stuff you've pursued to like maybe buy a web name, a lot of different stuff in between. But one of those things I learned along the way is the skills that you learn to set those up kind of transfer to future things. You could say like, oh, this business didn't make it. This was a failure. Like I should just go back and quit being the entrepreneur and just focus on my job or my career. And you go, but you've learned all these skills so that when you go and you want to do another business, you're not like, hey, I don't have to figure out how to rebrand a website. I don't have to figure out how to do e-commerce. I don't have to figure out how to like all these things that you would normally learn to do. And you just go, hey, I just know what works, what doesn't work. How would I do a business better this time? And going and acquiring a business is something that like I hadn't put a lot of thought into recently. I've looked at some stuff in the past, but I kind of tended to stick away from them because we talked a little bit about this idea of buying businesses that aren't transferable because they're like Joe's Hardware, and people go because they know Joe and they don't know Nate. So why would they keep coming to Nate's Hardware? Like, so then where's the equity in the brand and the name? But you really kind of like you said with that tie/wallet company, you go, hey, here's a business that could be successful, but they're lacking something. And you identified like, I have the skills to improve upon this business. And, can't you go in there, acquire them for a price that makes sense, increase their revenues by a bunch of money and decide if you want to keep this, as a long-term investment or turn around and sell it to the market for somebody else that might want to do it. So I believe you're on the right path with this ETA model because you're right. You don't have to, get started, work for free for a bunch of years and may or may not work out. You got a company that's already kind of successful and you look at ways to add value. But I'm going to ask you this question. A lot of times people start their own business because they don't have the funding to go and acquire one. So you're out there, I'm an entrepreneur, Nate. I want to figure out how to get going. Like, how do I get capital if I don't maybe have a large savings account or I don't have access to a loan or something like that? How do you recommend people get started finding funding?
Yeah, that's a great question, Nate. I think there's a lot of ways to approach it. And everybody thinks when you buy a business, you're thinking of the Googles and the Facebooks of the world, the $100 billion companies. And really, I'm when I'm talking about acquiring businesses for not private equity or anything like that, you're really looking into that like $500,000 to maybe $2 million price point, right? So most of these businesses are going to be valued at like a 3, maybe 2.5 to 3.5x of their profit or their seller discretionary earnings or EBITDA or however they report it. So if a business makes, say, $300,000 a year, you're probably going to pay anywhere from $700,000 to $900,000 for a business like that. In terms of funding it, there's a lot of ways to fund it, right? And I think when it comes into deal structure, we could talk all day long about the deal structure of it. And this is all stuff I didn't get an MBA, but it's all stuff I've just kind of learned through books and just kind of trial and error and talking to people who've done a lot of deals. And there are ways to, seller finance a business. There are ways to get an SBA loan for a business. SBA is probably one of the most common ways. And so, Nate, typically with SBA, you can put 10 to 20% down of the purchase price of the business and get a loan of 80 to 90% of that over 10 years for that business. Now, SBA is backed by the government, so you can go through most of your banks. Some banks are going to be faster than others, but say you wanted to buy maybe a $300,000 a year business, so that's going to be in profit, right? So that's about $1 million business. For about $100,000, you can essentially buy that business. Now you're going to have some loan payments that are associated with that. And on average, it's going to be about 40% of your cash flow will be tied up in those loan payments. So using that $300,000 a year in profit, about $130,000 or $140,000 a year will go towards the debt, but then you're left with $160,000, $170,000 a year to essentially pay yourself and, grow the business and reinvest in the business and grow that. So I think that's kind of one way to think about it. So you don't necessarily need to have millions of dollars, but at the same time, it does help to have some cash reserves and some kind of covering living expenses as you're searching for a company, or if you're doing this while you have a day job. Kind of the best time to buy a company is while you have a job, so that it kind of funds your search as you're looking. I think people would be surprised how many, I wouldn't necessarily call them angel investors, but maybe people who have been working in a career for a long time and they have, a couple $100,000 in a bank account, not making very good interest, right? So not making great interest. There are ways to just approach them and you can actually have an investor. Now, these aren't going to be 10x businesses. These aren't like VC funded businesses that are going to have these huge exits, but a lot of times you're going to be able to grow these businesses 20 or 30 or even 50% year over year, which can have pretty substantial growth. And, you can pay that investor back through, dividends, or you can pay them back through when the actual business is sold. Now, the other type I'd mentioned at the beginning is seller financing. Basically, seller financing is, similar if you were to buy a house and it was, financed by the seller, where you're essentially using the profits of the business to basically buy that business. So, like one example would be, say you put, half the business you get a loan for, and the other half is paid over the next 6 or 7 years because that seller wants like an annuity, right? A lot of times it's pretty common when you have someone who's 65 and they actually just want to get paid out over the next 6 to 8 years. That's a really good route to go. So you can pay them out of the profits of the business over time. And rather than them getting hit with a big tax burden right now, they can go make their $50,000 or $100,000 a year for the next 6 or 7 years, which is more beneficial to them on a tax standpoint. So whether you fund it through like an SBA loan, which most of your local banks can do that, or whether you fund it through, through some investors, or whether you sell or finance it, there's a ton of options available for most people. And most people are coming from maybe a career, Nate, right? Like if you're in a career and you've been in that career for years or looking for a change, they don't necessarily have that time or the idea, but they have a lot of skill sets that can transfer over to a small business, whether it's an HVAC company or whether it's an online business. You can transfer those skill sets over and you're basically walking into a system that's proven, it's been successful, and there's profit tied to it. So that would basically allow that person to come in and put their own spin and flavor on this thing to actually grow it.
I like what you're talking about with finding equity or different ways to structure deals to find a way to purchase a business. I think what I usually tell people when I'm talking, about startup companies, and you say, hey, like, why do some startup companies win pitch competitions and others don't? And it always boils down to who has customers. So the thing I always tell people, like if they're looking for, hey, I need all this money to fund my business, it's like, no, you need to find customers. And if you have the customers, you can find funding. And doing an ETA, you're buying a business that already has customers. So your access to capital is going to be a lot bigger. It's going to be a lot higher, and it's going to be a lot easier to find a way to structure the deal. And especially if you have like a strategy to improve their revenues somehow, do a value add. Maybe like you said, when you're talking about purchasing the wallet company, you say, hey, they're always out of stock and they're not really doing it. So like, hey, I could just kind of like improve the efficiency of having product in stock and a distribution system. And, maybe my price point is X dollars, but I'm going to invest another quarter of that. But I'm going to like triple or quadruple the revenues. It's going to make sense financially. So there's a lot to set up deal structures. I don't think we can get into too much detail on that on a short little conversation, but I think it's an amazing opportunity to say, hey, I want to be in the space of owning a business or being an entrepreneur. Like, yeah, definitely look at acquiring businesses. And sometimes you can have one model and you can acquire another business that's maybe complementary and kind of compound it and get some economies of scale by having some stuff. So I usually like to ask my guests this question, is this idea of luck. Do you believe in luck? Are people lucky?
I might give you a little bit more of a cop-out answer here, Nate. I think everybody kind of creates their own luck. Sorry, we're just closing some bays here. I think luck is one of those things, and I don't know if you're familiar with Naval Ravikant. He kind of, there's 3 levels of luck. It's like dumb luck, blind luck, and then I can't remember what the third one is. But I believe luck, a lot of is as you're doing things or doing activity. I almost think of luck as like a salesperson, right? If a salesperson just sits at their desk and waits for someone to call them, chances of something happening are very, very small and practically zero. Whereas at least if they're out and about or making phone calls, over time, those activities will lead to luck, and more deals will potentially come their way. I feel like that's the same with most types of luck. I look at businesses that I've been a part of where I initially got into the business for X, and then once you're in it, you see all these additional opportunities that look like luck. Well, you only were able to see those opportunities and those kind of lucky breaks after you took your own action, took a few steps into this dark room, the lights turned on, and you're like, oh, great, like there's so many more opportunities here. I think that's the case with kind of the luck I've seen in my own life. And when I've wished I was more lucky, it's usually because I wasn't taking enough action. And so you don't want to just have like blind action and run, where you just kind of wear yourself out, but you do want to basically do enough activity and in the right direction that you can have luck on your side. And if you do the right activities for long enough, you're in real estate, Nate. It's like, you can't just sit there and wait for the deals to fall in your lap, right? You do have to go out and make those connections, build that network over time, and that luck will follow. Anyways, that's essentially my belief, but I think everybody kind of creates their own luck. And so some people seem luckier than others, but if you look back at their true story, you don't see the fact that they're getting up at 4:30 or 5 a.m. and working on their side hustle before their kids get up. And then, they're doing these other activities that are kind of blind to anybody who's not with them 24 hours a day.
That's a cool answer. And yeah, it's kind of a cop-out, but I think there's a lot of truth to what you're talking about, is like you got to be in the right places at the right time, but you improve your odds if you're in the right places more often, so that when the right time happens, you're already there. And you talked a bit about action and taking, people say, hey, like you got to take a lot of massive action. And you're doing this journey of looking for companies to acquire, but you're also documenting your process through your website, Let's Buy a Business. Can you talk about why you decided that you wanted to document this journey of finding a business, and how has that like evolved since the idea you came up with to where you're at today, and where do you see it going in the future?
Yeah, so I've looked at businesses to buy for a long time, right? I did my first one in 2012, and I bought a few here and there, and I bought one last year, and I was able to sell one of my e-commerce companies in January, and I'd always been kind of part-time looking for a business to buy. And when I decided to just go full-time in it, I just said, hey, you know what? This is it. Like, I'm going to go down this path, and I'm going to go buy this company that's going to be my company for the next 10 or 15 years. And I'm going to try to really grow this thing and blow this up. And I started networking with all the brokers and looking at all the online deals. But within about 2 or 3 weeks, I'd kind of gone through everything. And one of my buddies said, why don't you just start posting online to see if anybody wants to follow along, but use it as a way to generate deal flow. And Nate, that's really what it's been. Is because I was able to just kind of document my journey. I think this resonates with a lot of people, as a lot of people would like to potentially work for themselves or have the upside of ownership. And when you own equity in a company, there's all these multiplier effects, and that's kind of my belief to financial freedom, is having the upsides that come with all the fruits of your labor. And so, as I started documenting this process, one, I underestimated how much time it would take, but two, I also underestimated how much fun it would be. And so I've had a lot of really fun conversations with people who've always wanted to start their own business, have their own business, but didn't really know where to start or didn't have that idea. And I've been able to kind of help them and just learn from my own journey. And I'm making tons of mistakes as I go about this. But the whole point is I just want to share those mistakes with everybody, because I think this is a very viable option. And whether you're looking at online businesses or local businesses, from a greater like economy and just generational outlook, you look at a lot of the baby boomers who are hitting the 65-ish age. A lot of them are ready to move on from their business, and there are really, really good local businesses that can make six figures, mid six figures a year, that eventually are going to need to be transferred over. And so I think kind of those younger generations, as we're coming up and say, hey, there's a lot of really good opportunities. And most people didn't grow up saying, I'm going to run a tow truck company, but you don't realize, but maybe that local tow truck company that you kind of drive by every day, it probably does $250,000 a year in profit. That's a pretty good living for a lot of people. And it allows someone to exit out of their business and, move on to retirement, jump in their RV and cruise around the country, and allows someone else to step into that too. And so I've actually found a ton of joy just by sharing my journey. And I've been very upfront. I kind of did it selfishly for like, oh, deal flow, this will be great. But in this journey, I've met so many interesting people who are now kind of going down this path to say, hey, this is another path for me and my family for financial freedom. And we can control that destiny a little bit better.
That's like right along the lines of a lot of the stuff I preach with. Like, I'm a big advocate of you have to build a personal network if you want to like improve your success. You got to reach out and connect with more and more people. And the reason why you do that is not so much like, hey, I'm connected with you, you're connecting with me, but it's like, how can I connect other people within my network to other people in my network and watch them grow. So I created my podcast as essential, like an extension to say like, hey, this will be, so me always looking for people to meet, maybe it'll be a way to attract people to come in and talk to me about it. And I think that's what is cool about your documenting the process. One, you're showing people like, you don't have to be, the next Shark Tank expert to go do this. Like you can start from little knowledge and learn along the way. Two, it's kind of interesting to see like, hey, watch where people start. Like you just got to get going. And you're right, you're attracting people into it, and you're meeting people you wouldn't have met under other circumstances. And that, like, I think is rewarding of itself. At least for me, it's been like, hey, I've met so many cool people. Like I could really care less about what the podcast does, but the conversations I'm having, they're really cool, are probably going to transfer to something else down the road. I don't know what that might be, but they're just like, you're getting exposed to new ideas, new things. And when you're documenting your journey, like you're right, it's hard to find businesses that are that are the right fit for you. They're profitable. They're in the interest level. You can add value to them. And if you're looking to acquire, I think everybody thinks like, oh, it's like shopping for a car. You go down and look and you see the one you want and it's a white one and you buy it. And you go, no, it's like, you got to look at like 100 businesses to find 10 that maybe warrant a second look. And of those 10, maybe 3 or 4 are candidates, and you narrow it down to one, and even that one has like a pretty low chance of being able to, I guess, exceed your expectations of it. So it takes a lot of whittling down. If you say, I got to look at 100 companies to find one I want to buy, and if I want to buy 5 in the next year, that's 500 companies. Like my broker's list had 30 on it. Like, okay, clearly that's not enough, and I'm not looking at enough things. So it's an amazing way to start getting people to come to you. But there's also, I think, if you started a business that just kind of turned into like you said, the tow truck guy, maybe the tow truck guy, 30 years ago, he got one tow truck, and that just kind of evolved into owns a fleet of tow trucks, and he has this business, and he's like, now what do I do? I'm looking to retire, and I like, how do you get rid of this thing? And you don't really know, and you go, hey, I heard somebody podcast that talks about people acquiring businesses, maybe that's an opportunity. So like you said, people might not be going to brokers because they don't know where to go about selling their business, but they go listen to things. You never know where that lead might come in. So I think it's a fantastic thing that you're doing to kind of attract the kind of people you want to do business with. And along the way, you're sharing your knowledge, which is huge to me. Is I had this junior high professor, or because he's a teacher, not a professor, and he said, you're going to learn about 25% of it if I tell you how to do it, about 50% if I show you, 75% if you do it yourself, but you're going to learn 100% of it if you teach someone else. And that's, I think, where you really gain your knowledge, is when you help others figure out their journey. So I love what you're up to. It's very, very exciting stuff.
I think along the same lines too, Nate, when you start teaching people, they call you on your BS. And there have been times where I'm like, oh, wait, like, you're right. Like, that's actually not true. I need to reframe how I'm thinking about this in my mind, because I had it in one way, but that's like totally inaccurate. And as you kind of put yourself out there publicly, or you're teaching people everything that you're learning, and almost not teaching, but just kind of sharing, you can't really BS yourself anymore. So it's almost like this gut check too. And it's interesting you say that. So I've looked at probably 200 businesses in the last 12 months. It sounds like a large amount of money, or a large amount of businesses. And now that I'm saying it out loud, it is. But you do want to look for a couple things when you're looking for a business, Nate. And one is, what are your skill sets, right? What value adds do you have? Are you really good operationally? Are you really good with marketing and sales? Or are you really good with, a new tech stack for like an old business, such as like an HVAC company that's still stuck in the early 90s? Can you bring a new tech stack in? And those are the types of businesses you want to find where you can add your value in there too. And the other thing is, it's kind of like dating. You do want to look at a lot of businesses. So even if you're like, well, I want to buy a business, but maybe I'm 3 to 5 years out, it can't hurt to start looking now. And because I've looked at so many businesses, I found a business last Wednesday, so about a week ago, and we're going under LOI today. And the reason, because I saw this business, I was able to say, oh, this has my skill sets, that it needs my skill sets perfectly. And then I need a developer. And so I immediately called one of my best friends. We ran it past him, and in 15 minutes, we came up with a plan that said, okay, we like this business. Let's do this, this, and this. We were able to move on this business incredibly fast, because by looking at all these previous ones, we knew exactly what we were looking for. And once we found it, we were able to pounce on it really, really quickly. It's similar to dating, where you just kind of look at a lot of things. You got to go on a lot of dates. And then as you do that, you start to refine what you're actually looking for. And then when you find that business, you can jump on it as quickly as you need to.
Cool stuff. And I think you probably have learned this along the way. As you're looking for businesses, you start meeting other people that have skill sets that are complementary. So hey, I need a developer. I'm going to call my developer friend. Or I need somebody that's got this skill set, but I know this person. So combined resources is adding value. And it's not just for yourself. So if you're not looking constantly, you're not going to figure out what you need. And everything takes practice and takes time to get better at. And so 200 deals is a lot to look at, but you can probably go through 20 deals relatively quickly, because like you said, 10 to 15 of them probably don't even resonate at all. It's just scratch. Okay, here's 5 that take a little bit more look. These 3 aren't any good. And then this 1 or 2, hey, okay. And of those 2, probably both of those are probably bad too, but you're quickly getting through them so that you go through your 200 to get here's the end of the year. I've looked at 5 that have real serious legs, and I bought 2. Yeah, cool stuff. So I wanted to go to my next question. I always ask everybody, what does the words all in mean to you around an idea or an outcome?
All in. That I love that question. I think I've actually thought a lot about this over the last few years. Because there's been times in my life where I haven't been all in, where I'm like, oh, I want to do X, Y, and Z, and I don't, right? And there's a saying, I don't even know who said it, but I kind of remind myself a lot about it. And it's 98% isn't 100%. And what I have found is when I'm 98%, I spend so much energy and time trying to determine whether it's the 2% that I'm like, well, if you're on a diet, right? If you're really strict on it, it's 100%. But if you're any room to wiggle, every single donut is that the 2%? And so you're constantly asking yourself every day and all the time, like, well, is this Starburst 2%, or is this donut, or is this candy, or whatever? And I think when you go 100%, a lot of people don't, and I've done this in my life with many things, is the biggest fear you have is that you will fail, and maybe the lie that you're telling yourself will come true or whatever. But when there's no excuse, there's a lot of power in that. You kind of have your back against the wall. And if you don't take any action, you're going to fail anyways. And so I think I know it might be 98% is most of the way there, but that 2% is such a big amount, and you waste so much time in the 2%. And a perfect example is, for several years of this 8-year journey, I was like, well, I'm kind of looking at businesses to buy. Well, guess how many businesses I bought and were able to build during that time period? 0. But when I went all in, it was like, wow, I have deal flow. I'm meeting all these interesting people. I'm meeting new brokers. And I saw a lot of deals that weren't necessarily right for me. And then I was able to pass them to other people I'd met. And so because being in 100%, I have the extreme ownership that I know it's on me and I don't have any way to fall back on. And it's kind of a scary jump to make, but I think as whatever it is, whether you want to lose 20 pounds, or whether you want to buy a business or start a podcast or ask this girl out or whatever it is, right? That 2%, it's a dangerous area. That gray area is a bad place to be in. So I think as you decide on something, make your decision and move on. I actually grew up in Chicago during the Jordan days, and I'm going to butcher this quote, Nate, but Jordan said once he made a decision, he never looked back at that decision. So once you make that decision, just go on, go in with it. And you know what? If you need to reevaluate and it doesn't work out, or you completely fail, that's okay. We're all failing tons of times. And the most successful people that I know, they might show just their successes online, like on their LinkedIn profile or something. But ultimately, you look back and they had 3 or 4 failures for every success that they had. And they were able to just kind of go all in, find out it didn't work, and then move on. So I go back to the saying that 98% isn't 100%. And the results that 98% of the population are going to get, or 98% of the effort, is, a fraction of what you're going to get if you go all in 100%.
I totally get that. Like, I've done diets and stuff like that. And when I've had the most success, it was very rigid and there was no exceptions. And it was, partial. That's when it was like, oh, I don't feel like doing it today, or this is like a cheat day, and you go, huh? And then that cheat kind of creeps. I think your 2% becomes 4%, which becomes 8%, 10%. And a year later, you're like, oh, I'm like, 70, 30. It's like, you just kind of creeped up. So if you got to hold your standards high. And
I think when you hit that 30%, you still tell yourself that it's only 2%. So right. You're like way off.
Yeah. It goes from like a donut on Saturday morning to like Saturday's a whole cheat day. And you're like, oh, I'm only cheating one day. And you go, well, that's 1/7 of your week. That's quite a bit, actually.
Yeah. That's like 17% of the week, whatever that number is. So
awesome. So let's talk about who you're looking to connect with, who you're looking to find your way. What does that avatar of that person look like, like? What are they up to?
So Nate, 3 months ago, I would have said, hey, I'm interested in people who are selling their business, but now I'm interested in people who are looking to buy a business or just looking for a different path. I've just documented my journey, and that's been super fun in itself. And it's not like I'm going to stop looking for a company to buy and running that company, but I've had so much fun connecting people with new businesses and just the new idea of becoming an entrepreneur through acquisition. It's really anybody who maybe wants a career shift or wants to maybe acquire a business. Also, at the same time, anybody who wants to sell their business, right? I might not be the right fit, but in this process and in this journey, I've met hundreds of people who are looking, and happy to kind of pass those along, whether it be to the right broker, whether it be to potentially the right buyer. I love doing deals, and I love seeing deals done. And I've seen it with my close friends. I've seen it in my own life, but doing these types of deals and buying companies and selling companies has literally changed my life. And so I can see it the same in everybody else.
Awesome stuff. So where can people find you if they want to get connected?
So you can find me on LinkedIn. So, Ryan Condie, or you can just go to letsbuybusiness.com. I have a podcast of the same name. You can find it in Shopify, Apple Store, App Store. So letsbuybusiness.com.
Very cool. So all those links will be on the show notes. I encourage you to reach out to Ryan, connect with him, tell him where you found him. But for the very least, if you have just like a small interest in what entrepreneurship through acquisition looks like, just follow, watch, see what it is, build some interest. Ask Ryan some questions, because I think when you have this interest and you want to do it, you don't know where to begin. And the first thing you want to do is just kind of see what other people in the space who have done it before are doing, and ask questions and get plugged into those people. So whenever I want to get most of my knowledge about a certain topic, I start hanging out where those people hang out, and you tend to kind of meet a lot more like-minded people, and that's a good start. Is just kind of observe and see what Ryan's posting, and just kind of get some questions and maybe reach out and ask him a few questions and have a conversation, see where that goes. Awesome, Ryan.
Love to connect with everybody. Thanks so much, Nate. It's been a blast.
All right. Thank you so much for coming on.
Make sure to visit our website, therealnatepeo.com, where you can subscribe to the show on iTunes, so you'll never miss an episode of All In. While you're at it, if you found value, we'd appreciate a rating on iTunes, or if simply tell 2 friends about the show. Looking to connect? You can find Nate Peo on LinkedIn or Instagram.